I was traveling through Central Asia a few years ago and found myself in a taxi in Tajikistan, headed toward the capital. I asked the driver what the name of his city, Dushanbe, actually meant. He didn't give me a grand lecture on geopolitical strategy or ancient kings. He just kind of shrugged and said, "It means Monday." I remember sitting there, watching the rugged landscape roll by, thinking about how strange that was. Why would a nation's seat of power be named after the most mundane day of the work week? It turns out it's because the city grew out of a village that simply held a popular market every Monday. It's a name that is completely literal, born from the dust of a roadside bazaar. But then you look at a place like Tokyo. If you ask a local there the same question, they'll point to the kanji characters. Eastern Capital. It's a name that doesn't just describe a location, it marks a massive historical pivot, the moment power shifted across Japan to face the Pacific. One city is named for a grocery run, the other is a declaration of imperial ambition. When we look at a map of Asia, we usually see borders and political entities. But if you peel back the modern labels, you find a hidden linguistic map. Some of these names are echoes of ancient geography cities inside the rivers or on muddy confluences. Others are bold modern inventions like Abode of Kings or City of Islam, chosen specifically to project a sense of destiny. From the Lion City to the City of Love, every Asian capital is hiding a secret identity in plain sight. If you know how to read the names, you realize they aren't just points on a GPS, they are the DNA of how these nations see themselves. Tonight, we're decoding the literal meanings behind Asia's most famous power centers to see what they reveal about the history, religion, and ego of a continent.
That is such a fascinating premise, because we really do treat these names as just abstract labels.
They're just dots on a map.
Exactly. You see Beijing or Jakarta in a headline, and you immediately think of the government or maybe the stock market or a tourist spot, but you never really stop to think, what does the word itself mean?
Right. What's the story behind it?
And when you start digging into the etymology, you realize that a capital city's name is, well, it's almost never an accident. It's a mission statement.
A mission statement. And looking at the research we've got piled up here for this deep dive, that mission isn't always, peace, love, and understanding.
Sometimes it's about raw, kinetic, undeniable power.
Yeah, projection of power.
It can be a claim to legitimacy, a description of strategic advantage, maybe a memory of a victory, or even just a very blunt statement of function.
So, to kick off this mission of ours, we have to start with one of the heavy hitters. We're going to get into the northern capital. But before we even get into the linguistics of it, I want to share this perspective that really grounded this whole idea for me. Because it's so easy for us to sit here and talk about geopolitics and grand strategy in these very abstract terms. But there is a physical reality under these names that I think gets missed a lot, especially in the West. I was reading this profile of a veteran logistics engineer, a man named Chen. He works the night shift at this absolutely enormous marshalling yard on the outskirts of Beijing.
Okay, so right in the thick of it.
And the way the article described his world, it was just so visceral. It's late winter. The wind is just cutting across these endless tracks. It's freezing cold. But the yard is completely alive. It's not dark and quiet. It's lit up like a football stadium.
It's that contrast that really stands out, doesn't it? I mean, the media is always, and I mean always, obsessed with what's happening inside the Great Hall of the People.
The speeches, the meetings.
The ideological debates, the handshakes, the men in suits. His world is measured in the rhythmic thrum of high-speed freight. It's steel on steel.
Exactly. He's standing there looking at these massive data screens showing real-time port throughput from Tianjin, which is hours away. And he's watching these automated cranes moving containers with a precision that the writer described as almost biological.
Like a living organism.
Yes. And Chen made this point that just really stuck with me. He said that for his team, power isn't some abstract concept they discuss in committees. It's not a policy paper. Power, for them, is the measurable density of the rail lines. It is the concrete ability to turn a symbolic name, Beijing, into a tangible, thrumming economic engine.
That is such a crucial distinction to make. It's the difference between, soft power, culture, diplomacy, rhetoric, and hard power, but not in the military sense we usually think of.
Not tanks and planes.
No, it's infrastructural power. Yeah. The northern capital isn't just a place where the leadership sits and makes decisions. It's the central nervous system of a sprawling physical machine.
And the scale of that machine. I mean, when Chen talks about the rail lines making the entire Asian continent shrink, he's not being poetic. He is being absolutely literal.
Yes, and that image the writer used, the city as a high-performance turbine. It's incredibly potent. And it actually brings us right back, full circle, to the name itself, Beijing.
Okay, so let's break that down for everyone just so we're all on the same page. What does it literally mean?
It's actually very straightforward in the Chinese characters. It's composed of two parts, Bei, which means north, and Jing, which means capital. So the northern capital.
Which, of course, implies the existence of others. You can't have a north without a south, or an east, or a west.
Correct. You absolutely have to understand it in relation to its historical counterpart, Nanjing.
The southern capital.
The southern capital. For centuries, Chinese history has essentially been a dialogue, or sometimes a battle, between these two poles. The south, along the Yangtze, was the cultural and economic heartland. It was the rice basket, the center of the scholars, the merchants, the canals.
The software, maybe?
Yes. While the north was the military and political stronghold. It was the shield against the nomadic peoples of the steppes. It was about control.
So by naming the city Northern Capital and keeping that name for so long, there's a constant acknowledgement of that directional weight. It's a declaration. It's saying, we are the anchor, we are the shield.
It is the anchor.
Yeah.
But what that story about Chen, the engineer, highlights so brilliantly is that Beijing is no longer just a symbolic anchor or a fortress.
Yeah.
It has become a physical hub on a scale that is genuinely hard to comprehend without looking at the numbers.
Right.
And the numbers we have here regarding the National High-Speed Rail Grid are they're staggering.
Okay, let's unpack those numbers then, because when we talk about this turbine, we aren't just using metaphors. We've got details here about the grid's expansion. And this part really blew my mind. The idea that the grid has evolved from a 4+4 system to an 8+8 system. Now, I'm not a logistics expert. What does that shift actually represent on the ground?
So the 4+4 was the original ambition, and it was already incredibly ambitious. 4 major vertical corridors running north to south, and 4 major horizontal corridors running east to west. Think of it as the skeleton.
Okay, the main arteries.
Exactly, the skeleton that connected the biggest cities. But the 8+8 system, well, that's the flesh and the muscle and the entire circulatory system. It's 8 vertical and 8 horizontal main lines.
That sounds like a massive increase in density, but what does it mean for, say, a person on the ground or for a box on a train?
It means total coverage. It means redundancy. It means if one line is congested or down for maintenance, the flow doesn't stop. It just reroutes. It means that Beijing, as the heart of this spiderweb, can reach almost anywhere. We are talking about a network length that has exceeded 45,000 kilometers.
45,000.
Yes. And to put that into perspective for you, that is enough high-speed rail track to wrap around the entire equator.
To wrap around the Earth at the equator. That's an absurd statistic.
It's a nation-building project on a civilizational scale.
Yeah.
But, the length is just one metric. The real game changer, and what your engineer Chen was alluding to with the shrinking continent, is the speed.
Right.
This is where that turbine analogy really holds up. You have the Fuxing class of trains.
And fuxing translates to what? Rejuvenation. Right, again, a name with a mission.
Exactly. Rejuvenation. These are not concepts chosen by accident. These trains are running at an operational speed of 350 kilometers per hour.
350, what? Over 215 miles per hour?
They have reduced the travel time between the northern capital, Beijing, and the biggest economic hub, Shanghai, to under 4.5 hours.
That's faster than flying door to door in many cases.
Yeah.
If you factor in getting to the airport, the security lines, boarding, taxiing, getting your bags, the train wins.
The train absolutely wins. And this is where we connect the symbolic capital part of the name to the physical reality of governance. In the past, the emperor's reach was limited by the speed of a horse.
Right. Weeks to get a message to the provinces.
Exactly. If there was a rebellion in the south or a famine in the west, the response time from the capital was measured in weeks, maybe months. Now, the northern capital can project its presence, its goods, its officials, and its people across the entire continent in a matter of hours. It fundamentally changes the relationship between the center and the periphery. It shrinks the nation. It turns a massive, diverse landmass into a tightly integrated economic unit.
And I saw a stat about the speed-up campaigns. This wasn't some slow, gradual evolution over a century, was it?
Oh, no, it was a sprint, an absolute sprint. In 1993, the average train speed in China was just 48 kilometers per hour.
48? I drive faster than that through my neighborhood to get groceries.
Exactly. It was a slow drive through the suburbs. So to go from 48 kilometers per hour to becoming the undisputed world leader in high-speed rail in under 30 years,
Yeah.
That is the tangible engine your engineer Chen was talking about. That's what creates that biological precision in the economy.
Oh.
But there's another layer to this, which I find fascinating, especially when we talk about Beijing specifically.
That.
Beijing is landlocked.
Right. It's, well, inland. It's not Shanghai or Hong Kong or Guangzhou on the coast.
So how does a landlocked northern capital function as a global powerhouse in an era defined by maritime trade? Oh, it needs a lung. It needs a massive port to breathe in the trade from the world oceans.
And that brings us back to the cranes Chen was watching on his screens. That's the port of Tianjin.
Correct. Beijing forms this massive economic superregion with Tianjin and the surrounding Hebei province. They call it the BTH region. And Tianjin is the dedicated maritime gateway for the northern capital. The data points from that port are just wild. The throughput is over 17 million TEUs.
And just for anyone listening who doesn't track shipping logistics, a TEU is a 20-foot equivalent unit. It's one standard shipping container, 17 million of them.
It's a city of containers moving every year. Volume. But what's so clever is how they integrate this port with that rail network we just discussed. It's a concept they call sea rail combined transport.
Okay.
The idea is to seamlessly connect that northern capital rail grid directly to the ocean-going vessels. And the key to this is something called a dry port.
I've heard this term before, port prediction.
It does, but it's a brilliant piece of logistical engineering. Essentially, you extend the legal and logistical function of the seaport deep into the hinterland. You handle all the customs, the processing, the container sealing, and all the paperwork at a rail hub, hundreds of miles inland, say, right next to a factory complex in Beijing, or even further west in a city like Xi'an. Then you put that sealed, customs-cleared container on a dedicated train, zip it directly to the docks in Tianjin, and a crane lifts it straight onto a ship. No delays, no extra processing at the coast.
So you're effectively bringing the coastline to the factory door. You are erasing geography with logistics.
You are erasing geography, exactly. It fully integrates North and Northwest China into the global economy, all orbiting through Beijing.
Yeah.
And this validates the Jing, the capital, as a center of undeniable competence.
That word, competence, that feels like the real pivot point here. Because when we in the West think of our capitals, Washington, London, Paris, we often think of them as places of debate, of law, of arguing, yes, process. But this description, the automated cranes, the 350-kilometer trains, the dry ports, it feels different. It feels almost like a massive engineering project that happens to have a government attached to it rather than a political project that sometimes builds things.
You've just hit on a major theme here. There's a broader argument about the nature of power in the 21st century. One of the concepts that comes up is this contrast between financialization and physical output.
Okay, walk us through that idea.
Well, there's a perspective, one that's discussed quite a bit in these Asian power centers, that Western economies have become too focused on the abstract, on finance, on rent extraction, on the software of the economy, if you will.
We move money around. We create derivatives of derivatives. We build apps.
While the hardware often gets neglected, the bridges might be crumbling, the trains are often late, but hey, the stock market's doing great.
Right.
The argument from this perspective is that reliable, punctual service, gleaming new stations, and the proven ability to move millions of tons of physical goods efficiently are not just economic statistics. They are potent symbols of a functioning social order.
Dang.
If you can make a train carrying hundreds of people arrive exactly on time after traveling 1,000 kilometers at 350 kilometers, it fosters a kind of deep collective trust in the system. It validates the state's legitimacy in a very tangible way.
That is a really powerful distinction. Competence as a form of legitimacy. It's not just, I am the capital because a document from 200 years ago says so, or because my party won the last election. It's, I am the capital because I can move you and your goods from point A to point B faster, more reliably, and more efficiently than anyone else on Earth.
And that physical reality anchors the name. Beijing isn't just a point on a map. It is the master switch for a machine that covers a continent. It gives the central government a lever to pull that actually does something tangible in the real world almost instantly.
It's fascinating because it really challenges our Western notion of what a developed nation looks like. We tend to think that development means moving away from manufacturing and infrastructure into services and finance and tech. But this model suggests that if you lose that physical connection, the rail, the port, the grid, you lose the very spine of the nation.
That's the Chen perspective, isn't it?
Yeah.
The engineer's view of the world. That without the rail density and the port throughput, the political slogans are just hot air.
So we have the northern capital asserting itself through sheer industrial and logistical muscle. An ancient name, Beijing, totally reinvented as a futuristic hyperhub. But that's a city with thousands of years of history. It has momentum. It has inertia. What happens when a nation decides that its current capital just isn't working anymore?
Right.
What happens when you decide to build a new heart for the country entirely from scratch? This brings us to our next segment, the will to build.
This is where things get really almost...
I was browsing an architectural forum as part of the prep for this, and I came across this incredible account from an urban planner. He was part of the very early frontier days of building Astana on the Kazakh steppe.
Okay.
And the way he described it, he called the experience a shattering of inertia.
Shattering of inertia.
I mean, imagine standing in a place where there was literally nothing but wind and grass. Just endless, flat, frozen steppe. And within a few short years, you're witnessing this geometric, futuristic capital city rise out of the ground by sheer state will.
Sure.
He contrasted this with his time working on infrastructure projects back in Western Europe. He said in Europe, getting a single new bridge approved might take a decade. You have environmental impact studies, local council meetings, endless bureaucratic hurdles, all while the existing pipes are crumbling.
And in Astana.
In Nusantara, the decision to rename and relocate the capital wasn't up for debate. It was what he called survivalist architecture.
Survivalist architecture.
Yeah.
That implies there's a threat, that it's a necessity.
He argued that for the newly independent Kazakh state, moving the capital wasn't a vanity project for a president. It was a strategic move to secure the nation's future, to hold it together. And listening to him, I felt this complex mix of feelings. From a strictly liberal democratic standpoint, this kind of rapid top-down urbanization can seem jarring. It feels clinical.
It lacks the organic chaos of a Monday market,
right,
like your Dushanbe example.
Right, there's no romance to it. But when you look at it through the lens of national development, you realize that for many of these nations, state capacity, the raw ability to just get things done, is the only thing standing between progress and chaos. We might value the slow, consensus-driven pace of our politics, but this story suggests that in the race for the 21st century, the ability to build and pivot decisively is a form of institutional efficiency that maybe the old world has forgotten.
It's the will to build. And Astana is probably the most famous case study.
So let's start with the name again, Astana.
Well, this is one of my favorite examples because it's so incredibly literal and functional. For a long time, the name was just Astana. And in the Kazakh language, Astana simply means capital.
So they moved the capital city and they named it Capital City.
Capital City, yes.
That's like naming your new dog.
The dog is. It's completely functional. It was later renamed Nur Sultan in honor of the first president, and now it's back to Astana. But the original intent was just strikingly practical. It's almost like a placeholder name that became the official brand. But the location, that's what tells the real story. Why move it there?
This is the forward capital strategy.
Exactly. The old capital, Almaty, is a beautiful city. It's leafy, it's cultural, it's nestled in the mountains, but it's in the far southeast corner of a vast country. It's peripheral. And critically, it's very close to the Chinese border.
And it's in an earthquake zone too, isn't it?
Yes, seismic activity is a major risk there. But geopolitically, the move to the north was about internal control. Northern Kazakhstan historically has a very large ethnic Russian population. By moving the seat of power to the harsh, windy central steppe, the state was planting a flag. It was asserting control over the entire territory. It was a move to unify the Russian-influenced north with the Kazakh south. It was a statement. We hold this space.
And the speed of it. To go from a forgotten provincial town to a Eurasian metropolis with these wild futuristic buildings, the pyramid, the giant tent.
That is the state capacity your urban planner was talking about. The construction of Astana involved moving entire government ministries, relocating tens of thousands of civil servants, many of whom did not want to move from pleasant Almaty to the freezing steppe, and building a skyline from scratch in an incredibly short window of time.
It sends a message, doesn't it? Both to your own population and to the rest of the world.
It sends a huge message. It says, the state is capable. The state can shatter inertia. The subtext is, if we can build a city like this in the middle of nowhere, imagine what else we can do.
It reminds me so much of Naypyidaw in Myanmar. That's another one that just sort of appeared on the map one day.
Absolutely. And the name there is just as declarative. Abode of kings or seat of kings. That's what Naypyidaw means.
Abode of kings.
And the logic is similar to Astana, though perhaps more driven by security and isolationism. They moved the capital deep inland, away from the coast where it could be vulnerable, into the defensible heartland. It's a strategic pivot inward. It says, we're retreating to a position of strength and control, far from outside influence.
It's so interesting how these literal meanings reflect the intent so clearly. Capital. Abode of kings. They aren't trying to be poetic about a river or a mountain. They're declaring a function. This is where the king lives. This is the capital. It's almost functionalism as an ideology.
And we're seeing this trend continue right now. Look at Indonesia. They are in the process of building their new capital, Nusantara.
Right, to replace Jakarta. Now, Jakarta has a powerful name in its own right, doesn't it?
A very powerful name, Victorious Deed. It commemorates the expulsion of Portuguese invaders in the 16th century, a very strong anti-colonial name that speaks to the nation's founding story. But the city itself, it's sinking.
Literally sinking into the sea.
Really. Due to massive groundwater extraction over decades, parts of the city are subsiding by several centimeters every single year. It's one of the most congested, polluted, and fastest sinking cities on Earth.
So the state is exercising that will to build again.
They were carving Nusantara out of the jungle on the island of Borneo.
And the vision for that one seems very different. It's not just about holding space like Astana, it's trying to be something else.
No, the vision for Nusantara is explicitly 21st century. It's being designed as a green, smart, sustainable city. They're talking about a 10-minute city where most amenities are accessible by walking or cycling. The stated goal is 100% eco-friendly construction. It's an attempt to leapfrog all the problems of the 20th century megacity, the gridlock, the pollution, the chaos of a muddy confluence like Kuala Lumpur, and build a utopian ideal from scratch.
It creates such a stark contrast with what that urban planner in the story called Western governmental inertia. The idea that in the West, we might argue about a new bike lane for 5 years.
Right.
While in Asia, they are physically moving entire capital cities because the old one is sinking.
It raises a really uncomfortable question for us about efficiency and survival. The story you read framed it as collective survival. If your capital is literally sinking, or if your nation is at risk of fracturing along ethnic lines, you don't have the luxury of endless debate. You need the capacity to act decisively. These new capitals, Astana, Naypyidaw, Nusantara, and even you could include Putrajaya in Malaysia, which was built as the new administrative center to relieve pressure on Kuala Lumpur, they are proof of life. They are the state declaring, we are not passive observers of our own destiny. We are the architects.
We are the architect. But while some capitals are being built from scratch in the jungle or on the steppe, others rely on a foundation that is incredibly deep, almost timeless. We talked about Beijing, the northern capital, but its counterpart across the sea has a name that is almost a direct response. This linguistic connection that binds these great rivals together.
Right.
Try to imagine a linguist in Tokyo. He's standing on a skyscraper balcony, looking out toward the horizon where the sun rises. I read this essay where he was reflecting on the simple characters for his city, Tokyo, and its giant counterpart to the west, Beijing. He argued that these names aren't just labels, they are anchors of a civilizational long game.
The long game. That's a term we throw around a lot in strategy circles, but here it's literally written into this script of the cities themselves.
He made the point that while Western cities often change their identities based on the whims of the era, think of St. Petersburg becoming Leningrad and then St. Petersburg again.
Right, reflecting political shifts.
Yes. But these directional names, North Capital, East Capital, they suggest a permanent geographical reality. The characters themselves, the script, have survived empires, occupations, and massive economic bubbles. To him, the fact that Beijing and Tokyo still define themselves by their cardinal positions proves that their strategic planning isn't measured in 4-year election cycles, but in centuries. It's a linguistic foundation that assumes the return of Eastern primacy isn't a surprise, but is simply a restoration of a natural order that was always written into the map.
That is a profound insight, and it connects directly to the tool that makes this long game visible, the writing system itself.
Because to an English speaker, the words Tokyo and Beijing sound completely different. There's no phonetic connection at all.
Right. Phonetically, Japanese and Mandarin Chinese are distinct languages, but visually, ideographically, they are using the same data set. This is the incredible power of the sinosphere, the Chinese character sphere.
Okay.
In Chinese characters, or Hanzi, the character for capital is Jing. In Japanese kanji, which was derived from Hanzi, the pronunciation is Q, but it is the exact same character.
So it's like a shared code, a visual language.
It's a shared conceptual language. Beijing is North Capital, Tokyo is East Capital, Nanjing is South Capital. Even if a Japanese person cannot speak a word of Chinese and a Chinese person cannot speak a word of Japanese, they can both look at the name Tokyo written in its native characters and understand perfectly. Eastern capital.
Oh, it's like a shared operating system for an entire region of the world.
And that operating system has survived for millennia. It survived the rise and fall of dynasties, the Mongol invasions, World War II, the Cold War, and the digital revolution. So when that linguist talks about civilizational resilience, he's talking about this shared framework. The name Tokyo itself is relatively modern. It was given to the city of Edo during the Meiji Restoration in the 19th century. But it fits perfectly into this ancient directional grid.
And what did that renaming signify?
It signified a massive pivot. Japan was moving its imperial capital from the ancient traditional city of Kyoto to the bustling eastern port of Edo, which they renamed Tokyo. It was a declaration that Japan was looking outward to the east, to the Pacific. It was bracing modernization and trade with the West, while still retaining that capital status in the traditional regional sense.
An eastern capital inherently implies a relation to the others, doesn't it? It positions itself on the board relative to the center or the north or the south. It's not an island, conceptually speaking. It's part of a constellation of power.
It acknowledges the geometry of power in East Asia. It creates a mental map where these nations are linked by their shared definition of center and capital. And speaking of that geometry, we have to look at the Korean peninsula.
Yes. The names there are fascinating, and they fit into this directional logic, but in their own unique way.
Let's start with Pyongyang in the north. The name literally means flat land or peaceful land.
Peaceful land, that is. Well, there's a staggering contrast there with the current geopolitical reality.
It is a stark and tragic irony. But the name persists as an ideal, maybe a memory of a time or a hope for stability. It reflects the flat geography of the river basin where it sits, but it also projects a desired state of being. And on the other side of the border, you have Seoul.
And what does Seoul mean?
This is really interesting because Seoul is a native Korean word that simply means capital. It's like Astana in that sense.
Just capital?
Yes. But historically, for centuries, it was known as Hanyang. And that name meant north of the Han River. So again, geography is destiny. It's a position relative to the river. Defined it. But choosing to use the native Korean word Seoul in the modern era is also a declaration of a unique identity, asserting a Korean center that is distinct from the broader Chinese character system, even though their history is so deeply intertwined with it.
So when we look at this directional map, north capital, east capital, south capital, what does it tell us about how these nations see the future? The story you mentioned talked about a return of natural order.
In the West, we often view history as linear, a march of progress from one point to the next. We rename things to honor new heroes or new ideologies. Washington, D.C. is named after a man. But these directional names, Beijing, Tokyo, they describe a fixed place in the cosmos. The North is always the North. The East is always the East. It suggests that the nation itself is a permanent fixture.
Right. It's not George Washington City, which implies a specific person from a specific era. It's the capital in the North, which sounds eternal.
Exactly. Governments can change, economies will rise and fall, but the northern capital remains the anchor. It supports that long game mentality we talked about. They aren't just trying to win the next quarterly report. They're trying to maintain their position in a geographical and civilizational order that they believe is permanent.
It's a kind of quiet confidence that doesn't need to shout because it's written right there on the map. We are here. We have always been here. We will always be here.
And you can feel that confidence returning as the economic center of gravity for the world shifts back towards Asia. From their perspective, it's not a new phenomenon to be analyzed. It's simply a restoration of the way things ought to be.
So we have the industrial engine of Beijing, the will to build of Astana and Nusantara, and these deep civilizational anchors of the East. But there's a whole other layer to this hidden map. When we look across the rest of Asia, the names get incredibly diverse and specific. They reveal ancient trade routes, religious aspirations, and some very local histories. We should do a kind of rapid-fire decoding of some of the other capitals because some of these are just too good to miss. Okay, let's start with the one that kicked off this whole journey for me, Dushanbe, Monday.
Right, and it's such a perfect starting point because it's a reminder that before there were borders and armies and geopolitics, there was trade. Dushanbe was just a simple village where people from the surrounding mountains met on Mondays to sell their sheep and their produce. It grew into a capital, but the name keeps it humble. It reminds us that the fundamental root of all urban life is the market.
I just love that. It's like naming New York Tuesday because that's when the stock market opens or something. But it speaks to the organic nature of how cities actually form.
Exactly. It wasn't planned by a famous architect. It was planned by farmers needing a convenient place to sell their goods.
Okay, what about Kuala Lumpur? It's this massive, gleaming, modern city with the Petronas Towers scraping the sky. But the name?
Bloody confluence?
Bloody confluence. It doesn't exactly sound like the City of Lights.
No, but it's completely honest. It describes exactly where the first tin miners settled, at the muddy junction of the Gombak and Klang rivers. It speaks to the raw, gritty, resource-driven origins of the city. It didn't start as a grand imperial project. It started as a muddy place to get work done, to mine tin. And now look at it, a global financial and cultural hub. It wears its humble, muddy origins right on its sleeve.
Then you go across the Arabian Peninsula to Riyadh in Saudi Arabia.
The gardens.
The gardens, in the middle of the desert.
It's a historical memory. It refers to the ancient oasis towns and the fertile date palm groves that existed there for centuries. Now, of course, it's a sprawling metropolis of concrete and glass and highways, but the name, the gardens, hold on to that memory of water and life in an otherwise arid landscape.
Then you have the complete opposite names that are pure aspiration. They're not describing what is, but what they want to be, like Islamabad.
City of Islam. This is another one of those planned capitals, like Astana or Brasilia. It was built from scratch in the 1960s to create a new, modern center for Pakistan, away from the chaos of Karachi. The name is a pure declaration of religious identity and national unity. It projects the ideal of the state. It's not about geography, it's about ideology.
And Bangkok. We all know it as Bangkok, but the locals call it Krungthep.
Yes, and that means City of Angels. And that's just the very short version. The full ceremonial name is officially the longest place name in the world.
Yes, what is it?
Oh, it goes on forever. It's something like the City of Angels, the Great City of Immortals, the Magnificent City of the Nine Gems, the Seat of the King, the City of Royal Palaces, the Home of Gods Incarnate. It just keeps going.
Wow.
It reflects a very specific Buddhist cosmology, seeing the capital not just as a city, but as a divine celestial kingdom on earth.
That is a very, very far cry from muddy confluence.
Indeed. It reflects the mandala concept of power you see in Southeast Asia, where the capital is seen as the divine center of the entire universe, with power radiating outwards.
Let's talk about names that are just pure declarations of power. Singapore.
Lion City. From the Sanskrit Singapura, it projects strength, sovereignty, and a little bit of national myth-making.
What's the myth?
Well, the legend is that a Sumatran prince landed on the island in the 14th century and saw a lion, even though lions were never actually native to Singapore. But the name stuck. It's a bold, powerful name for a small island city-state, asserting its ferocity and its independence.
And what about Ulaanbaatar in Mongolia?
It means red hero. And this is a fascinating one because it captures a very specific moment in 20th century history. The city used to be known as Urga. But during the period of heavy Soviet influence and the Communist Revolution in the 1920s, it was renamed Ulaanbaatar to honor the revolutionary hero Damdin Sukhothai. It's a name that freezes a moment of intense ideological struggle in time.
And finally, let's go back to Jakarta, your victorious deed.
Yes, it commemorates the victory of a local sultanate over Portuguese invaders in the 16th century. So it layers this history of anti-colonial struggle and national victory right over the location. It's a name that says, we won, this is our place, and we defended it.
From Monday markets to victorious deeds to red heroes and eastern capitals, it really does completely change how you look at a map. You don't just see a list of flight destinations anymore. You see the history of human intent.
The intent, whether it's the intent to trade goods, the intent to rule an empire, the intent to worship a god, or the intent to build a brand new future from the ground up.
We have covered a lot of ground tonight. We've traveled from the dusty Monday market of Dushanbe all the way to the high-speed northern capital engine of Beijing. We look at the abode of kings rising out of the jungle and the eastern capital looking out towards the Pacific.
And we've seen that these names are never just passive labels. They are a mixture of memory and ambition. They are tools. The state uses them to unify a diverse population, to project power to its neighbors, or to manage the economy with ruthless efficiency.
It reminds us that every single one of these megacities started with a definition, a market, a direction, a victory, or a dream. And when we decode the name, we stop looking at a foreign place on a map and we start seeing the human intent behind the power. We see the muddy confluence that became a global hub. We see the peaceful land that is still waiting for its peace. It's a reminder that geography isn't just physical, it's linguistic, it's psychological.
And as Asia continues its rise, these names, these fundamental declarations of intent, are going to define the story of the 21st century.
A fascinating journey. Thank you for guiding us through this hidden map. And to our listener, next time you check your boarding pass or you look at a headline on the news, just take a second to ask yourself, what does that name actually mean? You might find a secret history hiding in plain sight. We'll see you next time.